Gracious God, be with the meditations of our hearts and the words of my mouth. We ask this in your good and strong name. There's a poem that's been on my mind all week. You probably remember it. It's been around for a long time. It's up in a lot of teachers' rooms and Sunday school classrooms and offices. It's by Robert Fulghum, and it's called All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And when I think about that poem, I tend to sometimes think about the things that I learned when I was in my first kindergarten class. As a 5-year-old at school, learning how to sit at a desk, follow directions, smell the markers that were all wonderfully scented, that were, the apple flavor markers and all of that. But when I went back and read the poem, it kind of took a new bent for me. It says most of what I really need to know about how to live and what to do and how to be I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but there in the sand pile at Sunday school. The lessons that we needed to learn were in the sandbox at Sunday school. I think about that, and I learned a lot of lessons as a child in the sand pit at Sunday school. And I've been thinking about that as I've been packing my office this last week, because I've been going through cards from friends, from you, little cards that said, thank you for your sermon today. Thank you for the joke that you said. Cards that were friends from whom I had performed funerals for family members. Cards that said, I'm praying for you as you're sick. Cards that said, I love you when my grandmother and my aunt passed away. Cards that cared for me. As I put boxes together with books in it and thought about all of the lessons that we had learned together, I thought about this poem and the lessons that we have learned together here at Southern Hills. And I want to share and remind you of some of those lessons that we have been a part of together for these 9 years. First one, share everything. You are a church that lives out the core value of koinonia, which means living and fellowshipping together in community. And in a community together, you as Southern Hills know the value of sharing and caring for one another when there is a need. When someone walks in this door, you have a way of being able to look them in the eye and know if they need a hug, a joke, a handshake, or just it's good to see you this morning. You know how to share and care for one another. I think about how when we were getting ready to go to Honduras for our last mission trip that we would have had to Honduras, and we were all preparing, the group was ready to go, and the night before they were set to leave and fly out for Honduras, they got a phone call about Ranieri, who had been shot and had an attempted kidnap put on him. And he called and said, you can't come. And the group still had a mission. They no longer were going to Honduras, but they had a mission of making sure that Ranieri was safe. And this church rallied around Ranieri. People shared of their resources, of their time, of their talent to make sure that Ranieri got here and was safe. People called doctors and got surgery for Ranieri so that we could get the bullet out of his leg. People donated a car to Ranieri so that he could drive. People helped find a job and pay for lawyer fees so that he could be here legally. You rallied around Ranieri and you cared for him and you shared of all you had for this person that just select groups of people at Southern Hills had got to meet and be present with. The rest of us knew him through pictures only, but you treated him as a brother in Christ, as one you already knew, even though you had yet to meet him. You share of what you have. I think about this week when the youth went to your homes and picked up items for Hope Center, and how some of you were willing to stand and make goofy faces with them for pictures. You cared and shared out of your goods for people in our community who needed it. Out of your abundance, you are a sharing congregation. The other lesson is warm cookies and cold milk are good for you. I don't have to tell you this because many of you just shared a piece of cake with me out on the table in the gathering area. And man, am I jumping because there was lots of icing on it. But we have some of the best hospitality tables around. We share a warm cookie and a warm cup of coffee, and we laugh together. This is another beautiful aspect of koinonia. I don't know if many of you know, but there is a gentleman who on a regular basis, a couple times a month, comes in this door. He goes to the food table first, then he goes to the coffee table, and then he goes out the side door. He never stays for Sunday school or worship, but you at the fellowship tables talk to and love on him and care for him, and he knows that that table is a dependable table where he will be showered in love and grace and mercy, and he will be fed while he's at it. I think about, and I tell you all the time, but you just don't understand it until you've been standing at the line at Refuge Fellowship. When you stand there at the desserts, man, do you guys know how to do warm cookies and cake and milk and all of that. And the Refuge Fellowship people love when you share that abundance. The homeless community who doesn't always get a meal made with love knows that you show up with tons of cookies and cake. I mean, they outnumber the big pots of chili that we have. There's cakes, like we have maybe this much room for the food, and then the rest of it's cakes. They're everywhere. And they sit there and their eyes get big, and then it's like, well, I have to have strawberry and I have to have brownie, and oh my goodness, that white chocolate macadamia nut looks good. And so they got a pile of dessert as big as their plate. But why that's so important is that sometimes something sweet that's made with love reminds you when your world isn't going well and you're sleeping on the street, God still loves you and there is sweetness in life. A warm cookie does something for the soul. And you guys share of that in koinonia and fellowship. The next is play fair. When I interviewed to become the associate minister over 9 years ago, I talked to friends about Southern Hills, and the thing I heard over and over and over again was how awesome of a congregation this is. How people around the world know your acts of love and grace, particularly in the social justice world. They know of your generosity to care for others. And you never cease to amaze me when it comes to social justice work. Whether it's giving to Week of Compassion or going to a rally or being present with people when the world isn't going right, you show up. You use your voice, your presence, and your resources to help those who are oppressed to find equality and dignity. You fight for what is fair and right. It shouldn't be a surprise to you that service to others is one of those core values that we support, raise up, and rally behind. The next lesson is learn, sing, and think some. We take seriously our core value of deepening spirituality. And you live out in unique ways. It's so unique compared to so many other places. The disciples of Christ rallying cry that says, in essentials, unity, and non-essentials, freedom of belief, in all things, love. Which means that you're a safe place for people to come in and ask questions. We don't have to divide on different sides of the pew with liberal, conservative, middle of the road, whatever label you want to put on it, because those labels are so terrible. You choose to sit in the pew and have a conversation with one another and say, tell me about how you understand God. And you're willing to deepen your spirituality around those, and you're willing to have conversations. You're willing to create safe places for our kids, our adults, all ages, to ask the hard questions. I have so many friends who have been in churches who have literally had Bibles thrown at them. And this church says, your questions are safe here. You don't have to leave the Sunday school class. Let me tell you, I've been put in the hot seat so many times with your kids who have gone through the pastor's class, who have asked questions of me that I've gone, I don't know. I got to go consult with my group of people before I come back with an answer for this. Or even better, we've been able to say, I don't know, but let's learn this together. You create a place where people can learn some and think some as they deepen their spirituality. The last lesson is, and draw and paint and sing and dance, and wherever you go into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands and stick together, but always be aware of. I can't think of better words to describe our worship experience and the core value of worship here at Southern Hills. In worship, from our traditional to our contemporary, from our tables, from all the many different things that we put up, you draw and paint a beautiful image of God, and you sing gloriously about that God. We have some of the best music in this space. In all the churches that I've ever been to, we give place for people to dance. And in this worshiping community, we come together and we learn how to move and live in the world and prepare ourselves for when we go out into the world. We watch out for that traffic of what's happening in the world. And together we sing those songs. They will know we are Christians by our love, by our love, by our love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love. We will hold hands and we will walk together in this worship community. We know that there are people who gather to sing and pray for us in our deepest times of need, and we know that they are holding us up through worship and partnership together. And most importantly, in this worship service, with the inclusion of our kids, we learn to be in awe of wonder. We acknowledge the beauty of God and how God is moving. And sometimes when we have that awe of wonder with the kids, you never know what it's going to be. Usually it's Reed or Carter reminding us about the beauty of God found in a piece of pie. Or a dog that we love deeply. There's the awe and beauty around it. You are creative. You are welcoming in your worship. I was at this week and I got to keynote, and a young adult who I've walked with since she was before Cairo had said that this summer she had come to Southern Hills to see me, and I happened to be on sabbatical, so she didn't get to see me. But she came and worshiped, and she told me at camp about how when she came here, she walked in and people surrounded her and were talking to her in this worshiping space, and they were asking her questions. And she said there was one woman in particular who welcomed her in such a way that even though she had grown up in a disciples church, she felt more at home and welcomed at Southern Hills than she had in her own home church. You in this worshiping community hold the hands of those who walk into this space, even if it's for one worship, and you let them know that they are loved and God's love shines through you. There's a long list of things that I could lift up that I've learned in the sandbox of faith with you as you live out your core values every day. I want to remind you that as you look to the future as a congregation, I pray that you will continue to learn new things every day as you hold on to the core values that make Southern Hills such a unique and wonderful place. Remember these lessons as you enter into this time of transition. Let these lessons serve as a reminder for you of God's faithfulness and presence through the year. These core values, this love, this hospitality, this caring for each other is the manna that God has laid out in the deserts. And sometimes it's easy for us not to see it in the beginning like the Israelites. I love the word because it literally means, what is it? Sometimes those blessings are laid out in front of us and we don't recognize it as a blessing and we're left going, what is it? But when we step back and reflect on it, we remember that God was present with us through the good and the difficult, the joy and the tears, and God was blessing us with manna. I think about when Gary passed away. We didn't know what to do. We were in wilderness and we were lost and we were questioning and we wondered what it would look like in the future for us. But you showed up. You showed up in the chapel to pray 24 hours over this building. You showed up to surround Annie. You showed up in such a way that one person in this church had to go and rent a refrigerator and a freezer for Annie's house because you brought that much food. You showed up in radical ways. And we found manna in a difficult time. And we know morning by morning, God's faithfulness each day would not leave us, that it would be present with us. I think about that song, Great is Thy Faithfulness. In it, there's a line that says, morning by morning, new mercies I see. I want to leave for you a verse from that song as my prayer for you. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and a bright hope for tomorrow, blessings all mine with 10,000s beside. Great is God's faithfulness. Great is your faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies you will continue to see, even as we walk down different paths. Amen.